Welcome to Manifest, hosted by international evangelist, teacher, and author Perry Stone. Enjoy unique insight into prophetic and practical truth. It's time to feast on fresh manna, so get ready to be blessed and encouraged. And now, here is your host and teacher, Perry Stone.
I was just explaining to our group here that we're at En-Gedi, and behind us is a beautiful waterfall on the mountain, and it's also the place of the caves where King David held out against King Saul. And you all saw these little gazelles that are all over the place here. And these gazelles, you know, David said, as the hart panteth after the water brook, so my soul panteth after thee. And you come here and you see all these little parallels. Now, I'm going to talk about, in fact, let me just give you the title of this. It's called Your Fiery Trial, Know the E Factor. And that's E as in the alphabet, letter E. The fiery trial, know the E factor. Now, without going into much detail, there's a very good friend of ours, and we're very good friends with the family, who's a very well-known football player and had sustained an injury some time back. And I texted him and I said, this is a fiery trial for you. It wasn't expected. You didn't see it coming. It's affected some things physically for you and, you know, things like that. And it's a fiery trial. And fiery trials come, if you'll read what Peter said, to impact your faith. So let me read the verse, and then we're going to get into this. Here's what the verse says: that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory unto the appearing of Jesus Christ. Now in 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 1, Peter is writing to strangers. And that word strangers there in the scriptures actually refers to different nations. The King James translation sometimes and other translations talks about pilgrims. So the pilgrims and the strangers can allude both to the Gentiles, but more than that to the believers that are throughout the nations. And he tells them what's happening actually at this time is when Peter is writing his epistle, there is a lot of persecution breaking out against Christians. Paul wrote an epistle to the Hebrews, and he said to them that you have not yet gone into the point of shedding your blood. In other words, your persecution is verbal. Your persecution is with fellow Jewish people that don't understand why you've accepted Christ as the Messiah. And they're becoming very critical of you because you're not going back to the temple, making the sin offerings and the sin sacrifices. And Paul told him, he said, look, Christ was the final offering. If you go back to an animal, you're going lesser and it's not going to count anymore. And so that's what the book of Hebrews deals with. And so Paul is telling them about the persecution they're dealing with, but they're not being persecuted unto death. So what Peter is doing is he's talking to a group of believers, and Peter's Jewish, of course, and he's telling these believers, you're very heavy in your heart. There's a heaviness in your spirit because of what you're dealing with. But please understand that the process of what you're dealing with is called a fiery trial. Now, in the scripture, there are different types of trials. And when you look at this particular word trial here in the Greek, it's the Greek word dokime. And that word dokime is very interesting because if you do a study on what that word means, it means to pierce something through to see what it's made of, to pierce something through to determine what's on the inside of it. And the kind of the idea there is take a vessel and fill the vessel up, and you set the vessel on the shelf, but you don't really know, is there water in that vessel? Is there juice in that vessel? Is there oil in that vessel? So in order to determine what is inside the vessel, you pierce it through and see what comes out of it. So, because the hole creates the piercing for the substance to come out. And so what happens in the idea of a trial, there's two ways that trials affect people. And I want to look at this let's look at it this way. There is a perspective that God has toward a trial, and then there is a perspective that Satan has toward a trial. Now, we have to look at these and understand, okay, there is the test. We can call it temptation and trial because the word dokimazo is used for temptation and trial. So we can use that same word for a trial or temptation, however we want to look at it. And so when you look at it from God's perspective, and you can see this with the Old Testament parallels of the nation of Israel. God said to Israel, He said, I'm going to take you not the way of the ocean. In other words, He could have brought these people out along the beachfront property. Now think about this. In El Arish, which is at the border, it's actually toward Egypt on the Egyptian side, but this beautiful, you had fish to eat, and you could have gone fishing, and you could have hung out at the beach and gotten the sun, but he didn't. He said, instead of me taking you the way of the ocean, which is the land of the Philistines, because if I take you that way, you will see war. They have weapons, and you'll see war, and you'll get discouraged. And when you begin to see the war and feel the power of the war, a fear will come, and you'll want to come back to Egypt. So God said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you through the way of the wilderness. Now, when you say wilderness, I have been to Egypt before, and I've been in the Sinai Desert, and it doesn't have the rugged mountains like this necessarily. It's more of a desert. But look at this. This is very desolate. You have the acacia tree out here. That's about all that grows out here as far as a tree. And it's very desolate. There's not a lot of water here. So which way would you rather go? Wouldn't you just rather go by the way of the beach? Oh, of course. My wife would for sure. And you got the ocean, you got the fish, and you got the sand, and you can lay out there and have a good time. And if it gets too hot, you can jump in the water. No, God says, we're not going that way. God says, and here's what he says, I'm going to take you that way to prove what's in you. Now, I looked up the word in Hebrew where God told the Israelites, I'm taking you through a very dry, desolate desert to prove you. You know what that word prove means? You ready for this? To test by an adventure. So what they're going through to them is like hell on earth. It's hot. There is no water. There is no food. But God says, let's have an adventure. I mean, God calls this an adventure. Are you kidding me? Now, here's what God said. Pay attention. God says, I'm going to take you through the wilderness to prove to you what is in you. And he got him out there, and buddy, it came out, didn't it? They started complaining. They got negative. They said, God has brought us out here to kill us. God doesn't love us. Let's kill Moses. It's all his fault. Because what happened was, and don't miss it, the purpose of a trial, and everybody needs to hear this, any trial or testing you go through, the purpose of it is to show you what is really in you that you didn't know was in you. Oh, I hear a few amens. I don't know if anybody can hear the amens, but it's true. And here's the thing. No one knows what is really in them till they're under pressure. I always tell these young girls and guys that are dating and they think they're going to get married, I said, you don't need to see them when in their best. Because when you get married, there are going to be a lot of days they're not at their best. You need to see them under pressure. How do they react? How do they react to other people when people offend them? How do they react when people do them wrong? Because how they react before you're married is going to be multiplied after you're married. So, now I got a few amens. It wasn't quite as heavy that time. So, pay attention. God says to you, I'm going to put you into the trial to prove what's in you. Dokime. Pierce the vessel through to see what comes out. Now, on the other hand, I want to show you a testing and a trial from the perspective of Satan. The greatest example is in Luke's Gospel, I believe it's in chapter 22, where God says to Peter, Satan has desired you, and that word in Greek, desired there in the King James translation means to obtain by asking. It's very similar to what Satan did with Job. He went before God and said to God, God said, have you considered Job? And Satan says, not only have I considered him, I've been watching him. So let me test him. So Satan asked God's permission to test Job. Same thing happened with Peter. Satan came and said, I want to test this man to show you he is full of pride and arrogance, and he's not going to be as faithful as you think. And so Jesus said in Luke 22 to Peter, Satan has desired you that he may sift you as wheat. But I've prayed for you that your faith would not fail. Now, if we stopped at part A of the verse, Satan has desired you to sift you as wheat, and we put a period there, we would simply say Satan was going to test Peter. But then Jesus gives you the reason for the testing in part B of the verse. He says, Satan has desired you that he may sift you as wheat, and I have prayed that your faith would not fail. The purpose of God sending a test or a trial and allowing it is to show you what's really in you. It's to show you, do you really trust me? Do you believe when you lose your job that I can give you another one? Do you believe that when you've tithed and given and you've supported the ministry and suddenly your work hours are cut back, that I'm still going to down the road honor you for what you did in the past? Are you going to believe me despite what you're going through? So you have the perspective of God concerning a trial, and you have the perspective of Satan concerning why he's sending it. And the answer is always that your faith would fail. And the reason the enemy wants your faith to fail is because the Bible tells us that without faith, it's impossible to please God. So in other words, to please God, we must continue to believe in Him and believe He knows what's best for us even when the trial's going on. Now, I told you that this was about the fiery trial. And a fiery trial is not a normal trial. There are things that Paul said in Corinthians that are given, such are common to men. Some things all of us go through. All of us occasionally get a little depressed, a little oppressed, sometimes fearful of things. These are things that's common to man. However, there's other things that become a fiery trial. And a fiery trial is something that is like it continually is burning. It's like a fire that won't go out. It's like that when you think you got the victory over it or you think that everything's going to work out, something else happens and more wood is put on the fire. And then the next day, it's bigger than it was the day before. And then a week later, there's more trouble added onto it. And a month later, there's another bad report that's just come from the doctor. And it's something that you deal with every moment. It just doesn't go away. It's something that burns in your mind. It's something that keeps you awake at night. This is a fiery trial of your faith. Now, there is the E factor. And I'm going to give you the E factor right now. I know all these folks wish they were keeping notes right now. But they'll have to watch this later to get the notes. Here we go. The E factor is this: expose it, escape it, or endure it. Expose it, escape it, or endure it. Now, this is how you deal with any fiery trial. First of all, let's look at what it means to expose it. Exposing it is the light coming to it, and you see what's coming, and you deal with it before it settles in. Then escaping it is God in the middle of it shows you an exit to get out of it. But then there's times you have to endure it. And that's where Ephesians 6:13-14 says, having done all to stand, you must stand therefore. And that simply means after you stand and fought, you must keep standing, continue to fight the next battle and the next battle until the victory is completely won. Now I'm going to give you an example from the Bible of all three of these. The first example of exposing it is Acts 23. 40 men made an oath that they were not going to eat or drink anything until they killed the Apostle Paul. Now, if you read the book of Acts, Paul's nephew overheard these men make the vow, and he went secretly to the captain of the guard and said, you need to know this. They're setting up an opportunity to assassinate Paul. And so the captain of the guard secretly got 200 soldiers, you can read this in the book of Acts, on horses, and at night, when those men did not know it, Paul escaped that and escaped death. Why? Because someone exposed the plan before it could be fulfilled. That's an example of exposing the attack. Now, the second level is to escape it. In Genesis chapter 20, King Abimelech, and he was a king of an area that's way down in this direction south of Israel. King Abimelech sees Sarah. Now look, I'll be honest with you. There are Dead Sea Scrolls that I have been told that have a description of Sarah that in her older age was one of the most beautiful women on the earth. And she must have been, because when Pharaoh saw her, he went crazy. When Abimelech saw her, he went crazy. And poor old Abraham, he's an older guy, and there's his beautiful wife, and so he says, well, she's my sister. Now, honestly, he didn't really lie, because if you go back to the family lineage, there was a connection there, and it's kind of like a half-sister type of deal. So in other words, he wasn't totally truthful, but he was covering for himself. But he put himself in a bad situation, because this king is saying, well, if this is his sister, I could take her into my harem. And so this king is about to get in serious trouble. And then in Genesis 20, verses 6 and 7, God warns him in a dream and says to him, you're going to be a dead man, because if you take her to wife, now you understand what this meant. This meant that if he takes Sarah to wife, the covenant is going to be broken. It means that that covenant son, who would be Isaac, is not going to be born. So God says, you can just understand. So Abimelech tells Abraham the next morning, your God gave me a dream. Why did you tell this to me? You could have really caused a problem for me. So what happened was the dream and the warning allowed Abimelech to do what? It allowed him to escape. See, the previous one was to expose it before it came. Trouble was coming. A plot was set, but it was exposed before it could come. The second example we give you here is being able to escape it, and they escaped it through a dream. Abimelech was spared. The third example is to endure it. Now, Hebrews chapter 6 and verse 12 says that with faith and patience that we endure to obtain the promises. Now, folks, this is very important that you understand this, that there are times that the Lord you can see something coming and you just know how to cut it off. You just head it off before it happens. There are other times that you get into a situation and the Lord gives you wisdom to say, this is how I get out of this situation. But there are other times that you have to endure a trial or a test. And sometimes to endure, for example, in the book of Job, Job lost 10 children. Job lost all of his wealth and all of his animals. He was what we would call today a multi-millionaire. But literally in a day's time, his wealth is gone, his family is gone, and the only thing that existed was a few servants and his wife, who actually told him just to curse God and die. Now, the Bible says in the book of James that you've seen the patience of Job, and you have seen how God is faithful, that when you're patient to see you through things. And I'm paraphrasing that here. So there are times that you will have to be patient and you will have to endure things. And patience is the ability to wait without sweating. Did you hear what I said? It's the ability to wait without sweating. It's the ability to stand there and say, you know what? I know I'm in this, but God is going to see me through because God is faithful. Can somebody say amen to that? Now, let me show you something here. I want to show you about the endurance factor. And this is the one I want to key in on. Patience is the power to wait it out. Abraham waited 24 years before the promise came that his promised son Isaac would be born. Sarah waited 24 years before the promised child Isaac was born. Moses waited 40 years, from age 40 to 80, 40 years in the desert, just like this, before he led the children of Israel out back to the promised land. Then Noah waited 100 years in building the ark before the flood came. Now, can you imagine? Let's say I'm 60 and I've lived a pretty long life, and I go back and I can think years and years ago, Big Stone Gap, Virginia, Arlington, Virginia. But can you imagine building a boat for 100 years and how you have to have the patience while everybody's making fun of you, telling you what an idiot you are for building a boat? Then we find out that Joseph waited 13 years actually in prison until God exalted him to the second in command over Egypt. And he also made a strategy of 7 years of plenty, that when the famine came, the family was spared in Egypt. Now, we find out that David waited 13 years, and we are again in En-Gedi, and David was chased through the wilderness of En-Gedi and through the Judean wilderness. This is the wilderness of Judea. And right above here, about 45 minutes, is the area, the Mount of Temptation, where Jesus was tempted, because it says that Satan led him into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. And so it was here that David waited 13 years being chased by Saul until he could become the head of Zion. So to expose the attack, you can find in 2 Kings 6, Matthew 2 and 12, Matthew 2:13, that God will use a dream or a vision or send somebody to you to show you the warning to help you to escape. The Magi were told, do not go back to Herod and give him any information about this baby, but escape by another route. And it made Herod angry. You know the story. And then he slew the infants of Bethlehem under 2 years of age. We find out that if you want to escape the attack, listen to 1 Corinthians 10, 12 through 13. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. There's no temptation overtaking you, but such is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted above that which you are able, but will with the temptation also make a way of escape that you might be able to bear it. And I made a note here that I want to read. This escape is mentioned 8 times in the New Testament, and the basic root word of the Greek word means to walk on foot at a fast pace to an exit. So the point is, listen to me carefully. Sometimes you're waiting for God to come down and pull you out of something when God's telling you, get your shoes on and get out. That's what the word means. See, you remember in the book of Genesis when this woman named Potiphar cast her eye on this beautiful Hebrew young man named Joseph. And she kept pressing him every day. And if you'll read the Bible, she was pressing him for Joseph to have sexual relations with her. And one day she grabbed him and she pulled the coat off and he ran out of the house. So Joseph said to himself, I'm not going that way. And she had his coat as false evidence that he attempted to do something. But see, Joseph, what he did, he escaped the attack. Paul was about to be killed in Damascus, and they lowered him in a basket, and he escaped a death attack. Paul was in the city of Lystra, stoned and left for dead. But the Bible says when the disciples came and prayed, he was raised up, and God delivered him, and he continued his ministry. And then there's times that we just simply have to endure. That's the third E. Remember, it's expose the attack, escape the attack, or endure the attack. In James 5:11, behold, we count them happy which endure. You've heard of the patience of Job. You've seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. The word endure is found 12 times in the New Testament in the English translation. However, there's numerous different Greek words for the word endure. In this reference, it means, I quote, to remain, to stay up under, or to hold up under. It actually means to be able to hold up under pressure. In Matthew chapter 24:13, and I'll conclude with this, it says that he that endureth unto the end, the same shall be saved. Now we're coming into the time of great testings. We know that from the New Testament. We're coming into a time where there's going to be a lot of trials in people's lives. But the question is, do you have the strength and the ability to endure and the strength and the ability to stand, having done all to stand? And the answer is yes. And how do I know that? Because the Bible is full of examples of men and women who exposed the attack, men and women who escaped the attack, and men like Job who endured the attack, and in the end, God turned it around and blessed him with twice as much in the end as he had in the beginning. So receive this word today on the Manifest telecast, and let God help you in one of these three areas to maintain strength with him and continue to follow him. Now, right now, there's a brand new offer that helps keep Manifest on the air and will be a blessing to you. And at the offer's conclusion, watch where we're going to be coming to. I want to share it with you. From En-Gedi in Israel, a beautiful day at the Dead Sea, we thank you for joining us on the program today. God bless you.
We are living in epic times. We are the Revelation generation, and we must not hide in spiritual darkness, but must clearly understand these prophetic times and seasons. Also informing others that the last days are upon us. Perry Stone and Bill Cloud have joined together for an urgent series of new prophetic updates that are now available to you on CD or DVD. The messages included by Perry are the Hebraic prophetic code concealed in the Seventh Kingdom parables, America, epicenter of the next revolution, the new 70-year prophetic cycle and latest end-time signs, Israel prodigies being fulfilled, final birth pangs of the Messiah, America in crisis, the sign of fires, the axe, and the tree. Also included in your CD or DVD set are 3 messages by Bill Cloud that contain amazing prophetic insight. The messages are the beginning of sorrows, when God hides his face, the fight for America. To receive your set of CDs, request offer number 20PS2-CD. They are available for your gift of $60 or more. To receive the DVDs, request offer number 20PS2-DVD. They are available for a gift of $80 or more. You can order online at perrystone.org or by calling toll-free 1-888-21-BREAD. That's 1-888-212-7323. You may also write to us and send a check or money order to Perry Stone Ministries, P.O. Box 3595, Cleveland, Tennessee 37320. In this day and time, as we continue to experience biblical prophecy unfold, these timely messages are something you will want to share with your entire family and friends. We look forward to hearing from you soon.
As we mentioned last week, we're coming now to the conclusion of many of our Israel programs, and we will be sharing with you teaching from our studio. Now, we're preparing right now a set for something I'm going to be doing in the next couple months, which is a major DVD teaching on the prophecies that have been fulfilled in Israel since the past 70 years or so. And so this is going to be a really, really exciting teaching. We have probably over 100 pictures and video clips that we're going to be putting in it, and that's going to be down the road probably later on in the summer. We also have completed a teaching on the very in-depth on all the teaching I knew about the coming Antichrist and the time of the end, the 10 kings, and it answers so many questions that people have sent us over the past 30 years. So that's going to be coming out soon as well. So please keep that in mind. Now, we just want to remind you that the Epic Times Summit that we did is still available on DVD and CD. I hope you can get the DVDs because Bill did some Hebrew words that I'd like for you to see, the letters that he wrote out and the meaning of those words. And also we had some clips that we wanted to put in the form of pictures, some charts that are on the DVDs. So they're still available at this time, and we ask you to invest in the wisdom and knowledge and understanding that has taken us many times years and years to compile together. In fact, when we do one of these teachings, we don't just sit down and just write something out. Sometimes it's weeks on end for just one particular message, and you get the advantage of that. And remember that when you support it, you help keep the program on the air, which costs us millions of dollars a year to keep on the air around the world. We certainly appreciate our U.S. audience and our partners that help us to do this, but we also appreciate so many of you that contact us from overseas that are really being touched by the word of the Lord that you're hearing, and so many converts that we have that have come to know the Lord, and especially all my friends that are incarcerated, those precious men and women. Thank you for the letters that we get from you. We certainly appreciate hearing from you as well. Let me just also mention that if you want to know where we're going to be ministering, the best thing to do is go to perrystone.org to the itinerary and just look it up, because or Perry Stone Ministries, you have to put ministries in their Facebook page, and then we will update you of when we're coming to speak. Sometimes we'll book something and it'll be there a week or two later, and this is the only way that you can find out. Two other things is, once a month at the end of every month at ISO, International School of the Word in Cleveland, Tennessee, I'm going to be doing a revival service. And so that's every Sunday night, last Sunday night at the end of every month. And you're welcome to attend that. Also, the first of every month, I preach at Ramp Cleveland on the first Tuesday night. We welcome you to come and join us there. So all the other itinerary will be available there. Now, the Prophetic Summit is scheduled June 24th through June the 27th of 2021 at Omega Center International with Bill Cloud, Mark Biltz, Joel Richardson, and myself, Braden Hasty, doing the worship. And we're going to be opening it up in the month of March, later in March, for registration. And we ask you only register if you know you're coming, please. It's very important. We have to get a true registration. Our first big Summer Warrior Fest of 2021, it's the only one we're going to be having, is the summer of Friday, July 9th through Sunday morning, July the 11th. And man, we've got a team lined up. I'll be advertising that later. Your registration will be opening probably in the month of April, so get your youth group ready for Warrior Fest 2021. We'll be seeing you next week. Thank you.